I am Thais, 26 years old, and despite owning a chain of luxury boutiques across 3 states, I still shop at thrift stores and drive my grandmother's old Honda. My family never understood why I chose to live so simply, especially when I showed up to my sister's engagement party in a vintage dress while everyone else wore designer gowns. When my stepmother Ornella mockingly asked if I was still playing poor, I never expected my grandmother's necklace to catch my mother's attention. The look of shock on her face changed everything that night. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me your biggest family secret. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I silenced a room full of judgmental relatives with just one piece of jewelry that revealed my true success. Growing up as the daughter of Magnus and Selena Jellerson meant attending the finest private schools, spending summers in Martha's Vineyard, and having every advantage money could provide. My father built his pharmaceutical empire from nothing, transforming a small family pharmacy into a multi-billion-dollar corporation through innovation and determination. My mother came from generations of New York society, her family name engraved on hospital wings and museum galleries throughout Manhattan. They gave me every opportunity imaginable, but they also taught me the value of earning my own way in the world. Unlike my half-sister Ornella and stepbrother Cassian, who were content to live off trust funds and family connections, I was determined to create something meaningful with my own hands and vision. After graduating from Wharton Business School, I shocked everyone by declining a 7-figure executive position at Jellison Pharmaceuticals. Instead, I used my small inheritance from my grandmother, Rowena, to open a tiny vintage boutique in Brooklyn. My father was confused but supportive, believing it was a phase I would outgrow. My stepmother, Phaedra, was horrified, convinced I was throwing away my birthright for what she called playing dress up with old clothes. "You could be running the marketing division by next year if you join the company," Cassian said when I told him about my decision. "Instead, you'll be sorting through dead people's clothing in some rundown neighborhood." I just smiled and told him there was more to success than climbing corporate ladders. He looked at me like I had lost my mind completely. The boutique was everything I had dreamed of and more. Small, but perfectly curated, filled with carefully selected vintage pieces and emerging designer collaborations. I had always been fascinated by fashion history, by the stories that clothing could tell about the people who wore them. This was my chance to share that passion while building something entirely my own. That was where I met Thessaly, a 70-year-old fashion industry veteran who addressed celebrities and royalty for 5 decades. Thessaly became the mentor I never knew I needed. While my father had taught me about business theory, Thessaly showed me the practical magic of retail, customer connection, and brand building. She was brilliant, elegant, and completely unimpressed by flashy displays of wealth, despite her legendary success. She wore simple black outfits, drove a modest sedan, and lived in the same Upper East Side apartment she had owned for 30 years. Yet she had dressed 3 generations of fashion icons, and every major designer in the industry sought her advice and approval. "True style is invisible," she told me once. "The moment you try too hard to impress others with your success, you have already failed at understanding what elegance really means." I absorbed her philosophy like a sponge, watching how she moved through the world with quiet confidence and authentic grace. When my first boutique became profitable within 8 months, Thessaly encouraged me to expand. She introduced me to suppliers, connected me with emerging designers, and taught me how to read the market in ways no business school ever could. She became my first investor and advisor when I decided to open a second location in Manhattan. The first 2 years were a whirlwind of 18-hour days, constant learning, and small victories that felt monumental. I lived in a studio apartment above a bakery in Brooklyn. The smell of fresh bread wakened me each morning as I prepared for another day of building my dream. Every penny I earned went back into the business. Better lighting, more inventory, marketing materials that look professional despite my shoestring budget. Thessaly watched my progress with quiet approval, offering guidance when I needed it most. When my second location in Soho struggled initially, she didn't offer money or connections. Instead, she taught me something far more valuable: how to read customers, how to understand what they truly wanted versus what they said they wanted. Fashion is psychology, she explained one afternoon as we arranged a window display. People don't buy clothes. They buy the story they want to tell about themselves. Under her mentorship, I learned to curate not just clothing, but experiences. Each boutique became a carefully crafted environment where customers could discover pieces that felt like they had been waiting their whole lives to find. My family remained largely unaware of my growing success. They knew I had opened the second store, but I never discussed revenue or expansion plans at family gatherings. I preferred to listen as Ornella boasted about her latest shopping sprees and Cassian detailed his expensive hobbies funded by trust fund payments. My father occasionally asked about the business during our monthly dinners, and I could see his curiosity growing as he noticed subtle changes: the quality of my business cards, the professional photography from my website, the mentions in small fashion blogs. But I kept my answers vague, focusing instead on his pharmaceutical research or my mother's charity work. The breakthrough came during my third year when Vogue featured one of my vintage finds in their Hidden Gems section. A 1950 Dior jacket I had discovered in an estate sale was photographed on a major actress for a red carpet retrospective. Overnight, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Fashion editors, celebrity stylists, collectors, everyone wanted to know where they could find similar pieces. That single mention led to a partnership with three emerging designers who wanted to create capsule collections exclusively for my boutiques. Within 6 months, I had opened a third location in Los Angeles and hired my first full-time employees. The vintage pieces remained the heart of the business, but the designer collaborations provided the steady revenue stream that allowed for real growth. Thessaly was there for every milestone, celebrating quietly in her understated way. When I signed the lease for the Los Angeles store, she presented me with a small velvet box. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said simply. "She wore it when she opened her first dress shop in Shanghai in 1925. Now it should be with someone who understands what it means to build something beautiful from nothing." Inside was the most exquisite necklace I had ever seen. Art Deco designed with intricate platinum work surrounding a central emerald, flanked by perfectly matched diamonds. It was clearly from another era, crafted with the kind of attention to detail that no longer existed in modern jewelry making. "Thessaly, I cannot accept this," I protested. "This must be worth a fortune." She fastened it around my neck with gentle hands. "Worth is not always about money, darling. This necklace has been waiting 70 years for the right person to wear it again. Promise me you will wear it when you need to remember your strength." 6 months later, Thessaly passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was devastated. The necklace became my most treasured possession, not for its monetary value, but because it connected me to her wisdom and strength. I wore it every day as I navigated the business through its next phase of growth without her guidance. In the year following her death, my boutiques exploded in popularity. We secured exclusive partnerships with 5 major designers, opened 2 more locations, and were featured in every major fashion publication. I was invited to Fashion Week events, awarded Emerging Retailer of the Year by Fashion Business magazine, and began receiving acquisition offers from major retail chains. Through it all, I maintained Thessaly's philosophy of understated elegance. I still lived in my modest Brooklyn apartment, though I had upgraded to a 1-bedroom with better lighting for photographing inventory. I still drove my grandmother's Honda, and I still avoided the spotlight whenever possible, preferring to let my work speak for itself. My extended family remained blissfully unaware of my transformation from struggling boutique owner to rising fashion entrepreneur. The annual Jellerson family gathering was a tradition that had continued for 3 generations, held each fall at my parents' estate in the Hamptons. It was an elaborate affair where success was measured by visible wealth and social connections. This year's gathering promised to be particularly intense. Ornella had recently become engaged to Dorian Gretzky, heir to a luxury hotel empire, and the celebration would dominate the evening's conversation. As I prepared for the party, I thought about Thessaly and what she would say about my anxiety over facing my family's judgment. I could almost hear her gentle laugh and her advice. Let them have their diamonds and declarations, darling. You are building something that will outlast their gossip. With that thought in mind, I dressed in my usual understated style. A simple black vintage dress from the 1960s that I had restored myself. Minimal makeup, comfortable heels, and Thessaly's necklace tucked discreetly beneath my collar. I drove my grandmother's Honda through the familiar iron gates, past the perfectly manicured gardens and reflecting pools. The circular driveway was already crowded with luxury vehicles. Cassian's new Lamborghini positioned prominently near the entrance, Uncle Theron's Bentley, my cousin Mila's Tesla, and several other high-end cars belonging to various family members. My modest Honda looked distinctly out of place among the automotive display, but I had long ago stopped caring about such superficial comparisons. I parked between a Ferrari and a Porsche, grabbed my small clutch, and walked toward the mansion's imposing entrance. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. About 30 family members and close friends filled the main ballroom, champagne glasses glinting under crystal chandeliers. The room buzzed with the familiar symphony of competitive conversation, business deals, vacation destinations, recent acquisitions, and social achievements. My mother spotted me first. Celie McGellerson was stunning in her early 60s, wearing a navy Valentino gown that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Her dark hair was styled in an elegant chignon, her posture perfect despite the weight of her elaborate sapphire jewelry. "Thais, darling," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks before stepping back to assess my appearance. "You look lovely, though I do wish you would wear the Cartier pieces I gave you for your birthday. They would complement that dress beautifully." "This is more my style, Mom," I replied, giving her a genuine hug that she returned with typical reserve. "You look absolutely radiant. The sapphires are spectacular." She sighed, but smiled. "Well, at least the dress fits properly. Come say hello to everyone. Ornella has been showing off her engagement ring all evening, and Cassian just closed the major deal at the investment firm." Of course they had. My siblings' achievements were always the evening's headline news, while my own remained carefully unmentioned. I followed my mother through the glittering crowd, past conversations about Mediterranean yacht charters and private art acquisitions. My father was engaged in discussion with Uncle Theron near the grand piano, but he looked up as I approached. Magnus Gellerson was distinguished and commanding. His silver hair and expensive suit marked him as someone accustomed to authority. Unlike my mother, who embraced luxury wholeheartedly, my father maintained a certain restraint, as though he never quite forgot his humble beginnings, working in his father's small pharmacy. "There's my brilliant daughter," he said, breaking away from his conversation and crossing the room to embrace me properly. His hug was warm and genuine, smelling of the same cologne he had worn throughout my childhood. "How was the drive out? Traffic wasn't too bad, I hope." "Fine, Dad. The Honda runs like a dream," I replied, noting Uncle Theron's barely concealed smirk at the mention of my car. My father nodded, studying my face with the careful attention he gave to everything important in his life. "You look tired. Working too hard again?" "Probably," I admitted, "but things are going well. Glad to hear it, he said, lowering his voice slightly. I've been meaning to ask about that Vogue mention. Quite an achievement for a small business. I blinked in surprise. He had been paying more attention than I realized. You saw that? He smiled. I keep tabs on my daughter's success, even when she's modest about it. He squeezed my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Thais. Building something on your own terms takes real courage. Before I could respond, Uncle Theron approached with his characteristic swagger, cocktail in hand, and superiority complex fully activated. Thais, there you are. We were beginning to wonder if you'd gotten lost in Brooklyn traffic. His laugh was too loud, his smile sharp around the edges. Hello, Uncle Theron, I said, accepting his brief hug. How are things at Gretzky Holdings? Booming, absolutely booming, he replied, taking a substantial sip of his premium whiskey. We just acquired a resort chain in the Caribbean, adding $200 million to our hospitality portfolio. He gestured expansively. But enough about my success. How's your little vintage shop doing? Still managing to keep the lights on? My father's expression tightened slightly at his brother's condescending tone, but I maintained my composure. We're doing well. Thank you for asking. Good, good. Persistence is admirable, Uncle Theron said, patting my arm in a way that felt more patronizing than supportive. Ornella was just telling everyone about her engagement party budget, $50,000 just for flowers. But I suppose that's what happens when you marry into serious money. As if summoned by her name, Ornella appeared beside her father, practically glowing with self-satisfaction. My stepsister was 28, conventionally beautiful in the way of women who spent fortunes on personal trainers, estheticians, and stylists. Her engagement ring was ostentatious, even by our family standards, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light with every gesture. Cousin Thais, she said, air-kissing near my cheek while being careful not to disturb her makeup. I love the vintage look, so authentic and economical. Her smile was razor-sharp beneath the compliment. Thank you, I replied evenly. Congratulations on your engagement. Dorian seems lovely. She straightened her already perfect posture. He's perfect. Harvard MBA, runs 3 hotels in Europe, and his family owns half of Monaco. She leaned closer conspiratorially. The wedding budget is already at 7 figures. Daddy says money is no object when it comes to making the right social connections. I nodded politely while internally cringing at her transparent materialism. Thessaly's necklace felt warm against my skin, a reminder of what truly mattered beyond social climbing and status displays. My stepbrother Cassian joined our circle next, his designer suit impeccable and his confidence insufferable. At 30, he had perfected the art of looking successful while contributing minimally to society. His trust fund provided a comfortable lifestyle that he supplemented with a nominal position at an investment firm owned by family friends. Thais, looking beautifully simple as always, he said. Still driving the family relic, I assume. Grandmother's Honda serves me well, I replied. How charmingly sentimental, Ornella chimed in. Though I do worry about safety. Those older cars don't have modern security features. Not that anyone would target a Honda, I suppose. Cassian chuckled. Speaking of transportation, did you see my new Lamborghini? 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds. Italian engineering at its finest. Sometimes you have to reward yourself for hard work. I thought about his definition of hard work, which primarily involved networking at expensive restaurants and attending charity galas for the social media opportunities. It's certainly flashy, I said diplomatically. Success should be celebrated, he continued, warming to his favorite topic. There's no point in achieving something if you can't enjoy the fruits of your labor. Take Ornella's ring, for instance. Dorian could have bought something modest, but why settle for ordinary when you can make a statement? Ornella extended her hand, making sure the massive diamond caught the chandelier light.
3 carats, flawless clarity, custom setting. The jeweler said it was one of the finest stones he'd worked with in years. Beautiful, I said, though I found its size somewhat vulgar compared to the understated elegance I preferred. And practical, Cassian added. A ring like that holds its value, unlike... He trailed off, glancing meaningfully at my simple appearance. Unlike what? I asked, genuinely curious about where this conversation was heading.
Well, unlike investing everything in a small business with uncertain returns, Uncle Theron interjected smoothly. Not that there's anything wrong with entrepreneurship, of course, but there's something to be said for more traditional wealth preservation strategies. My cousin Mila approached during this exchange, her expression bright with champagne and gossip potential. Are we talking about investment strategies? How fascinating! She turned to me with exaggerated interest. Thais, you must have such unique perspectives on financial planning, given your circumstances. The condescension was becoming more obvious with each passing minute. I could feel the familiar weight of their judgment, the subtle ways they positioned themselves as more successful, more sophisticated, more worthy of respect. But tonight felt different somehow. Thessaly's necklace rested against my heart like armor, reminding me of everything I had accomplished despite their dismissive attitudes. My circumstances are quite comfortable, thank you, I replied calmly. Of course, Mila said quickly. I just meant that building a business from scratch must require such careful budgeting. Every penny must count when you're starting out. Still starting out? Cassian asked with apparent surprise. Hasn't it been several years now? I thought most small businesses either failed or succeeded within the first few years. Ornella picked up the thread immediately. Oh, but Thais is so committed to her vision. It's inspiring how she stuck with it despite the challenges. Her tone suggested that persistence in the face of obvious failure was admirable but foolish. The conversation was interrupted by the announcement that dinner would be served, providing a temporary reprieve from their increasingly pointed observations about my lifestyle choices. As we moved toward the formal dining room, I caught my father watching me with concern, clearly noting the undercurrents of family tension. The dining room was magnificent as always, with a table set for 30 guests, gleaming with crystal, silver, and fine china. Name cards indicated our seating arrangements, and I was unsurprised to find myself placed between Cassian and Mila, while Ornella held court at the opposite end near my parents. The first course arrived with typical elegance, seared duck breast with cherry reduction, artfully plated on bone china that probably cost more per piece than most people spent on groceries in a month. As silverware clinked against plates and wine glasses were filled with vintage Bordeaux, the evening's performance officially began. These family dinners always followed the same predictable script. Achievements would be casually mentioned, acquisitions subtly highlighted, and social hierarchies reinforced through carefully orchestrated conversation. I had witnessed this dance for years, but tonight I felt like I was observing it from a different perspective entirely. Mila, that bracelet is absolutely stunning, Aunt Variana commented from across the table. Is it new? Mila touched the diamond tennis bracelet encircling her wrist with practiced modesty. Oh, this? Yes, Shepard surprised me after closing the Pemberton account. 18 carats from Tiffany. We had it custom designed to match my engagement ring. How thoughtful, my mother replied approvingly. Speaking of business success, Theron, I heard Gretzky Holdings is expanding into the Asian markets. Uncle Theron dabbed his mouth with his napkin before responding, clearly savoring the opportunity to discuss his achievements. Yes, negotiations are in the final stages. Cassian has been instrumental in the due diligence process for our Singapore acquisition.
All eyes turned to my stepbrother, who adopted an expression of humble pride that looked rehearsed from years of practice. Just doing my part for the family business, but the expansion will add approximately 40% to our annual revenue. We're also looking at opportunities in Tokyo and Hong Kong. Cassian has always had exceptional business instincts, Uncle Theron continued, his chest swelling with paternal pride. He gets that from my side of the family, naturally. My father raised an eyebrow slightly but said nothing, taking a measured sip of his wine instead. I knew he was thinking about how Uncle Theron had inherited his position at Gretzky Holdings through marriage rather than merit, and how Cassian's exceptional instincts were largely theoretical since he'd never worked anywhere else. "And Ornella, dear, have you finalized the wedding venue?" my mother asked, smoothly redirecting attention to the evening's other star. Dorian surprised me with the most romantic proposal. He has reserved the entire Grand Hotel Monaco for our ceremony, 300 guests with receptions on both the terrace and the yacht club. The floral budget alone is more than most people's annual salaries. The conversation continued in this familiar pattern as the second course arrived. Lobster bisque with truffle oil, served in delicate porcelain bowls. I ate quietly, responding politely to direct questions while remaining largely on the periphery of the competitive discourse. Cassian, however, seemed determined to draw me into the spotlight. "So, Thais, how is the entrepreneurial journey treating you these days? Still working out of that shared space in Brooklyn?" "Actually, we moved to our own flagship location in Soho last year, plus additional locations in Manhattan and Los Angeles." "Multiple locations?" Ornella asked, her perfectly shaped eyebrows rising slightly. "That must be expensive. Commercial real estate in those areas cost fortune." I nodded noncommittally. "It's manageable."
"And how many employees do you have now?" Cassian pressed, clearly fishing for information that would confirm his assumptions about my limited success. "Still just you and a part-time assistant?" "We've grown considerably," I said simply, not elaborating on the actual numbers. Uncle Theron leaned forward with an expression of practiced concern. "Expansion can be dangerous for small businesses, especially in the fashion industry. The overhead costs alone could sink a company if revenue doesn't keep pace." "That's very thoughtful advice," I replied diplomatically. Aunt Verena joined the conversation with her characteristic blend of condescension and false sympathy. "Darling, you know the family is here for you if things become difficult. There's no shame in admitting when it's time to try a more stable career path. I'm sure your father could arrange something suitable at Gellerson Pharmaceuticals." "That's generous, Aunt Verena, but we're doing quite well," I assured her. "Of course, dear," she said, patting my hand in a way that suggested she didn't believe me for a moment. "I just worry about young women in such uncertain industries. Look at Mila. She has security working for that established law firm." Mila beamed at the mention of her conventional success. "The partnership track is demanding, but there's something to be said for institutional stability. Plus, the benefits package is extraordinary." "Exactly my point," Cassian interjected. "Entrepreneurship is romantic in theory, but there's real wisdom in choosing established paths. My college roommate tried the startup route. Brilliant guy. Seemed to have solid ideas. Lost everything within 2 years, and now he's managing a branch office in New Jersey." Several family members nodded sagely at this cautionary tale, as though Cassian's anecdotal evidence proved the foolishness of any unconventional career choice. "I remember when you first announced you were opening a boutique. What was the concept again? Something about vintage clothing and emerging designers?" "That's right," I confirmed. "Seems like such a niche market. Vintage pieces are so hit or miss, and emerging designers usually don't have established customer bases. It must be challenging to maintain consistent inventory flow."
I thought about our waiting list of collectors, the designer partnerships that had fashion editors calling daily, and the celebrity stylists who regularly cleared out entire seasonal collections. We managed to keep customers satisfied. "I'm sure you do your best," Cassian said with patronizing encouragement. "But I wonder about long-term viability, especially with fast fashion dominating the market. Most consumers want affordable, trendy pieces, not expensive vintage finds." My father cleared his throat pointedly. "Tyus has built something quite impressive, actually. I've been following her progress." The table fell momentarily silent, surprised by his interjection. Cassian looked uncomfortable, clearly not expecting any pushback to his dismissive assessment. "Well, good for her," Ornella said quickly, her smile becoming slightly strained. "It's important to follow your passion, even when it means making certain lifestyle sacrifices." "Speaking of lifestyle," Mila added with pointed curiosity, "I noticed you drove yourself tonight. Still attached to that old Honda?" The question hung in the air with obvious implication. Here was the moment they had been building toward, the final confirmation of my inferior status within the family hierarchy. I opened my mouth to respond to Mila's pointed question about my transportation choices, but at that precise moment, something unexpected happened. As I reached for my water glass, the collar of my vintage dress shifted slightly, revealing just a glimpse of Thessaly's necklace beneath the fabric. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened as she caught sight of the platinum and emerald design, her expression transforming from polite dinner conversation to stunned recognition. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked, her voice cutting through the table's chatter with unusual sharpness. The entire dining room fell silent. Cassian looked confused by this unexpected interruption of his moment of superiority. Ornella frowned, clearly annoyed that attention had shifted away from her engagement stories. "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious about the necklace I had worn hidden beneath my dress. "Your necklace," my mother said, setting down her silverware with deliberate precision. "May I see it properly?" I hesitated, then slowly pulled the chain from beneath my collar, allowing the Art Deco masterpiece to rest visibly against the black fabric of my dress. The emerald caught the candlelight magnificently, its deep green fire complemented by the intricate platinum work and perfectly matched diamonds. My mother leaned forward, studying the piece with growing amazement. "This is a Thessaly Chen original," she said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "From her grandmother's collection." Uncle Farron frowned, his cocktail-induced confidence wavering. "The fashion consultant who died last year? She made jewelry?" Before she became the most influential stylist in New York, Thessaly Chen was trained as a jewelry designer by her grandmother in Shanghai. They created maybe 20 pieces total before the family fled to America in 1925. Each one was entirely handcrafted, using techniques that died with the old world artisans. She looked up at me with an expression mixing shock and newfound respect. "How did you come to possess this?" All eyes were now focused on me. The dynamics of the entire evening had shifted in an instant. Cassian's earlier mockery hung awkwardly in the air, like smoke from an extinguished candle. "Thessaly gave it to me," I said simply. "Before she died, she was my mentor and partner in building the business." My father sat back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Do you understand what you're wearing?" I nodded slowly. "I know it's valuable, but that's not why I wear it." "Valuable," my mother said, addressing the entire table now. "That necklace is worth approximately $4 million, possibly more given its provenance and the fact that Thessaly's death has made her grandmother's collection legendary among collectors." A collective gasp rippled around the table. Ornella's mouth literally dropped open. Cassian's wine glass slipped in his hand, though he managed to catch it before it fell. Aunt Verena started coughing delicately on her lobster bisque. "Oh, this old thing?" I said with a casual shrug, lifting the necklace slightly to catch more light. "I wear it every day. Thessaly insisted that beautiful things should be used and enjoyed, not locked away in safes." My father was shaking his head in amazement. "The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Each element was hand-forged using traditional Chinese techniques combined with Art Deco sensibilities. Collectors have been searching for pieces from this collection for decades. Most are in museums or private vaults." Uncle Farron was staring at the necklace with completely altered interest, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by something approaching reverence. "$4 million around your neck? You should have that insured properly, Thyza." "It is," I assured him calmly. "Thessaly arranged comprehensive coverage when she gave it to me. She said it was the first thing her grandmother created in America, a symbol of hope and new beginnings." Cassian had recovered enough to rejoin the conversation, though his tone was completely transformed. "I had no idea you were close to Thessaly Chen. She was a legend in fashion circles, dressed 3 generations of icons." "She was more than that," I said quietly. "She was a friend who believed in what I was building when few others did." "Which was what, exactly? You've always been rather mysterious about your business details." I took a sip of water, considering how much to reveal. Thessaly had always advised strategic transparency. Share what serves you purpose, protect what doesn't. Perhaps it was time for complete honesty. "We developed a curated fashion platform that connects vintage collectors with contemporary designers. We started with physical boutiques because authenticity requires personal touch, but we've expanded significantly into digital curation and exclusive partnerships." My mother blinked in surprise. "Digital partnerships? You never mentioned technology components." "The platform launched 6 months ago. We now work with designers from Milan, Paris, and Tokyo, plus major collectors from around the world. Our AI-powered authentication system has revolutionized vintage verification." "How major?" Cassian asked, unable to contain his curiosity. I met his gaze directly. "Our last funding round valued the company at $800 million. We're projecting to reach $1 billion by next quarter." Another stunned silence fell over the table like a heavy curtain. My father was looking at me with open pride and amazement. My mother appeared completely bewildered, as though she was seeing me clearly for the first time. "But you still live in that small apartment," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "And you drive grandmother's Honda." I smiled genuinely. "I love my apartment. It's close to the Soho flagship, and I can walk to my favorite coffee shop every morning. As for the car, it's reliable and efficient. Thessaly took the subway every day of her life, even after she became the most sought-after stylist in the world." "A true Chin disciple," my mother murmured, recognition dawning in her eyes. "She always believed that authentic style came from confidence, not consumption." "Exactly," I agreed, and she lived that philosophy every single day. Uncle Farron was struggling to reconcile this new information with his previous perception of me. "So, your company? It's actually successful then?" "Very," I confirmed. "We're currently in discussions with 3 major fashion houses about acquisition offers, though I'm not interested in selling. The business is about more than valuation." Ornella was frantically typing something into her phone under the table, probably searching for information about my company or trying to verify the claims I had just made. The engagement ring that had dominated conversation for the first half of the evening suddenly seemed less impressive when compared to a $4 million necklace worn casually with a vintage dress. "You're a near billionaire?" Mila said incredulously, her voice barely above a whisper. "And you've been keeping it secret all this time?" "On paper, potentially. Most of my net worth is tied to the company's valuation. I take a reasonable salary and live according to my values, not my bank balance." But why keep it hidden? Aunt Vervina asked, genuinely perplexed. If I had achieved that level of success, the entire world would know about it. I thought about Thessaly and her quiet confidence, her complete disinterest in impressing people who valued her for the wrong reasons. Because true success isn't measured by what others think of your achievements, but the impact you create and the problems you solve. Our platform has helped thousands of designers reach global markets. We've authenticated millions of dollars worth of vintage pieces, preventing fraud and preserving fashion history. That matters more than any valuation.
My father was nodding slowly, a new understanding dawning in his expression. Chin's philosophy: focus on the craft, not the recognition. She taught me that we reveal our authentic selves not through what we own, but through what we prioritize, I continued. Every choice reflects our true values. The dinner continued, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted completely. Family members who had barely acknowledged my presence earlier were now finding excuses to engage me in conversation. Questions about my business strategy, about Thessaly, about my plans for expansion came from all directions. Through it all, I maintained the same calm demeanor I had shown throughout the evening, neither gloating over this dramatic reversal nor playing into their suddenly heightened interest. The necklace rested visibly against my dress now, but I treated it no differently than I had when it was hidden, as a treasured reminder of someone who had shaped my understanding of genuine worth. As the dessert course was being served, individual chocolate soufflés with gold leaf garnish, Cassian leaned toward me, his voice low enough that others couldn't hear clearly. I owe you a sincere apology, Tace. I've been condescending and dismissive for years. I assumed that because you didn't display your success, you had none to display. I studied him carefully, trying to determine whether his contrition was genuine or simply a recalculation based on new information about my financial status. What exactly are you apologizing for, Cassian? He looked uncomfortable but pressed forward. For treating you like you were less accomplished than the rest of us, for the comments about your car, your lifestyle choices, your business prospects. All of it was inappropriate and wrong. And if my company was worth $10,000 instead of $800 million, would you still be apologizing? I asked quietly. Cassian had the grace to look genuinely embarrassed. That's a fair question, and it cuts right to the heart of my character flaws. It's the only question that matters, I pointed out. Because if you're only sorry now that you've discovered I'm wealthier than you imagined, then you've completely missed the point of this entire conversation. He was quiet for a long moment, genuinely reflecting on my words rather than formulating a defensive response. You're absolutely right, he finally admitted. I've been measuring people's worth by completely superficial standards. It's how I was raised, but that's no excuse for perpetuating it. It's never too late to reassess your values, I told him, my tone softening slightly. Thessaly was 45 before she had her revelation about authentic success. She completely transformed her approach to both business and relationships after that. I'd like to hear more about her philosophy sometime, Cassian said. And for the first time all evening, his interest seemed completely genuine. If you'd be willing to share those lessons? I'd enjoy that conversation, I replied, somewhat surprised by his apparent sincerity. As Cassian rejoined the broader table discussion, my mother approached from the other side, looking slightly flustered and uncertain. Tace, darling, I feel absolutely terrible about all the suggestions I've made over the years about upgrading your apartment, buying a proper car, wearing more expensive jewelry, she said, taking my hand in both of hers. If I had known about your success level— Mom, I interrupted gently. That's exactly why I didn't discuss the company's valuation. I wanted you to accept my choices for what they were,
not because they came with a certain financial backing. She looked confused, as though the concept was difficult to grasp. But surely you understand that we only wanted what seemed best for you. To see you living so modestly when you could afford anything you desired? This is what I desire. A meaningful business that solves real problems in the fashion industry. A life focused on creating value rather than displaying wealth. Relationships with people who appreciate me for who I am, not what I own. But you could have both meaningful work and beautiful luxury items. They're not mutually exclusive. I touched Thessaly's necklace gently. I do have both. This is the most beautiful thing I own, and I treasure it not for its auction value, but for what it represents. The same principle applies to everything else in my life. My mother sighed, clearly still struggling to understand my perspective, but she smiled with genuine affection. Well, at the very least, you must let me help you find a stylist. Someone who can create looks that reflect your position in the industry. I couldn't help but laugh. Some things never change, do they? I love you exactly as you are, Mom, even when you're trying to redesign my entire aesthetic. She smiled reluctantly. And I love you even when you're stubbornly rejecting perfectly sensible suggestions about proper accessories. The evening continued with increasingly genuine conversations. Some relatives were clearly still processing the revelation, adjusting their mental frameworks to accommodate this new version of me. Others seemed to be questioning their own definitions of success and wondering whether they had been focusing on the wrong metrics all along. As coffee and after-dinner drinks were served in the library, I found myself engaged in more substantive conversations than I had experienced at any previous family gathering. The revelation about my success had certainly altered how people interacted with me, but more importantly, it seemed to have prompted genuine self-reflection among several family members. My father found me near the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, nursing a small glass of aged whiskey and studying the leather-bound first editions that lined the walls. "Quite an evening," he said, settling into the burgundy leather armchair beside mine. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" I gestured to the chair. "Please, I could use some quiet conversation."
He swirled his scotch thoughtfully before speaking. "You know, I've always respected your desire for independence, for forging your own path, but I had no idea you were building something of this magnitude while maintaining such discretion. Would it have changed anything if you had known?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. He considered this carefully. "It wouldn't have changed my pride in you, but I might have been more protective, helped you navigate some of the family politics more effectively, perhaps spared you some of the condescension you've endured over the years." "I can handle condescension," I assured him. "What troubles me more is how quickly everyone's treatment changed once they learned about the company valuation. It proves that they were never really seeing me as a person." My father nodded with immediate understanding. "The burden of wealth. People see the money, not the individual. It's why I've always been cautious about new relationships that develop after major business announcements." "Thessaly warned me about exactly this phenomenon," I said. "She told me once that she could count on one hand the number of people who truly knew her, rather than her reputation and connections." "She sounds like she was an exceptional mentor," my father observed. "I wish I had taken the time to know her better. We crossed paths at industry events occasionally, but never had meaningful conversations." "You would have appreciated her philosophy," I told him. "She believed that authentic success was invisible to casual observers. The most valuable achievements couldn't be displayed or purchased." My father looked thoughtful. "Watching you tonight, I saw so much of myself at your age. The determination to build something meaningful on your own terms, to be judged by merit rather than family connections." This surprised me. Really? But you've always seemed comfortable with all of this luxury, with the social expectations that come with wealth. He chuckled quietly. Your mother embraces it because it brings her joy, and I participate because making her happy is important to me. But privately, I'd be perfectly content in a house half this size with a fraction of the formal entertaining. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Why do you think I spend so much time at the research facility or that cabin in Vermont? Sometimes simplicity is the greatest luxury of all. I had no idea you felt that way, I admitted. We have more in common than I realized. Perhaps we've both been too skilled at hiding our authentic selves, he said with a rueful smile. Though I should have recognized what you were building sooner. Should have seen past the modest lifestyle to the ambitious vision underneath. You saw enough, I assured him. Remember, you were the one who mentioned the Vogue feature tonight. You've been paying attention, even when I thought you weren't. Professional curiosity at first, then genuine admiration as I realized the scope of what you were creating. But I respected your privacy, your desire to succeed independently. Our conversation was interrupted when Ornella approached, looking uncharacteristically humble. Her earlier confidence had been replaced by something approaching uncertainty. Uncle Magnus, could I borrow Thais for a moment? She asked, her usual commanding tone notably subdued. My father stood graciously. Of course, I should check on the other guests anyway. He squeezed my shoulder before walking away. We should have lunch soon. I'd like to hear more about your expansion plans. Ornella took the vacated chair, smoothing her designer dress nervously. I wanted to talk to you privately, she began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. About what? I asked, though I suspected I knew where this conversation was heading. About how I've treated you over the years, she said, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time all evening. I've been horrible, Thais, condescending, dismissive, cruel in ways I convinced myself were just harmless family teasing. I waited for her to continue, curious whether this apology would prove more substantial than Cassian's earlier attempt. The truth is, I was threatened by you, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You've always been so confident in your choices, so comfortable with being different from the rest of us. I think I attacked you because I was jealous of that self-assurance. What exactly were you jealous of? I asked, genuinely puzzled. You've had every advantage, every opportunity handed to you. Ornella laughed bitterly. Exactly. Everything was handed to me. I've never built anything myself, never proven that I could succeed without family, money, and connections. You walked away from all of that and created something extraordinary anyway. She gestured around the opulent room. Look at tonight. My engagement is supposed to be the big news, but everyone can talk about is your business success and that incredible necklace. And the worst part is, you deserve the attention. You've actually accomplished something meaningful. I studied her carefully, trying to determine whether this vulnerability was genuine or calculated. Ornella, success isn't a competition. There's room for all of us to build meaningful lives. But don't you see? Your success makes me realize how empty my achievements really are. I'm 28 years old, and the most impressive thing about me is my engagement ring and my ability to plan expensive parties. That's not true, I said, though I had to think for a moment to identify her actual talents and interests. You're incredibly organized, you have excellent aesthetic sense, and you're skilled at bringing people together socially. Those aren't real accomplishments, she protested. They're just expensive hobbies funded by family money. They could be real accomplishments if you applied them to something meaningful, I pointed out. Event planning is a legitimate business. Interior design requires genuine skill. You have talents that could translate into actual careers. Ornella looked surprised, as though the possibility had never occurred to her. "Do you really think so?" "I know so," I said firmly. "The question is whether you're willing to work for something instead of just spending money on it." Our conversation was interrupted by Uncle Theron, who approached with considerably more humility than he had displayed earlier in the evening. His swagger had been replaced by something approaching genuine curiosity, and perhaps a hint of embarrassment about his earlier behavior. "Thias, I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, though his tone suggested he had been waiting for an opportunity to speak privately. "I wanted to discuss something with you." Ornella excused herself gracefully, promising to continue our conversation about potential career paths at a later time. Uncle Theron settled into the chair she had vacated, his usual commanding presence noticeably subdued. "I owe you an apology," he began without a preamble. "My comments tonight about your business, your lifestyle choices, your prospects, all of it was inappropriate and, frankly, embarrassing in hindsight." I waited for him to continue, curious about whether his contrition would prove more substantial than simple social politeness. "The truth is, I've been dismissive of entrepreneurship in general, because I've never had the courage to try it myself. It's easier to criticize others for taking risks than to acknowledge your own fear of failure." This was unexpected honesty from someone who typically projected absolute confidence in all his opinions. "What kind of risks did you want to take?" "I always wanted to start my own investment firm," he said, looking somewhat surprised by his own admission. "Had ideas about more ethical approaches to wealth management, better ways to support emerging markets. But when the opportunity came to marry into Gretzky Holdings, it seemed safer to take the established path." "Safer isn't always better," I observed. "Thessaly used to say that the biggest risk was never taking any risks at all." She was right, Uncle Theron agreed. "I've spent 25 years in a position I inherited rather than earned, making safe choices that never challenged me to grow. Tonight, listening to you describe building something from nothing, I realized how much I've limited myself." "It's not too late," I told him. "Plenty of successful entrepreneurs started their most important ventures later in life." "Perhaps," he said thoughtfully, "though I suspect I lack your particular combination of vision and courage." As Uncle Theron rejoined the broader gathering, I found myself reflecting on how one evening had created such profound shifts in family dynamics. The revelation about my success had certainly surprised everyone, but more importantly, it seemed to have prompted genuine introspection about their own choices and values. Mila approached next, looking thoughtful rather than her usual gossipy and superficial self. "I keep thinking about what you said earlier about measuring success by impact rather than acquisition. What specifically resonated with you?" "I've been working at that law firm for 4 years now, but I've never once felt like I was making a meaningful difference. We represent corporate clients in disputes that are essentially just wealthy people fighting over more wealth." She paused, considering her words carefully. "When you talked about your platform helping designers reach global markets, about preserving fashion history, I realized I can't remember the last time I felt proud of my professional contributions. What would meaningful work look like for you?" "I've always been interested in immigration law, helping families navigate the system, protecting people's rights. But the pay is significantly lower and the social status—" She trailed off. "The social status would be lower according to whom?" I pressed gently. "The same people who were dismissing my business success 2 hours ago?" Mila laughed, understanding the point immediately. "You're right. I've been letting other people's opinions dictate my career choices instead of following my own values." As these conversations continued throughout the evening, I was struck by how one evening had apparently given others permission to examine their own lives more honestly. The necklace that had revealed my hidden success was also uncovering deeper truths about family relationships and personal priorities. When it came time to leave, I declined offers from several relatives to arrange proper transportation, instead calling another rideshare service. My father walked me to the door while we waited for the car to arrive.
Tonight changed something fundamental in this family, not just their perception of you, but their understanding of what success actually means. I didn't, that was never my intention, I said honestly. I just wanted to be treated as a person rather than a project to be fixed or pitied. I know, he replied, but sometimes authenticity is more influential than any deliberate strategy. You've shown them that there are different ways to live a meaningful life. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I'd like to visit your headquarters sometime soon, meet your team, learn more about this platform you've built, if you'd be comfortable with that. I'd love that, I said, genuinely pleased by his interest. How about next week? I could give you the full tour, introduce you to our designers and developers. It's a date, he agreed, as my ride pulled into the circular driveway. And Thais, keep wearing that necklace exactly as you do. It belongs with someone who understands its true value. As I settled into the back seat of the car, I touched Thessaly's necklace gently, thinking about how objects, like people, could reveal unexpected depths when given the opportunity. To my family, the necklace had transformed me from struggling entrepreneur to serious success story in a single moment of recognition. But to me, it remained what it had always been, a connection to someone who had taught me that authentic worth had nothing to do with external validation. The evening had certainly been dramatic, but the real transformation wouldn't be measured in changed perceptions or newfound respect. It would be seen in whether these conversations led to genuine self-reflection and meaningful changes in how family members approach their own lives and relationships. 3 weeks after that transformative family dinner, I found myself sitting in my corner office overlooking Soho, watching the morning sun filter through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our headquarters. The space was modern but warm, with exposed brick walls displaying photographs of our design partners and vintage pieces that had found new homes through our platform. No expensive art adorned the walls, just visual reminders of the real people and stories that made our work meaningful. The visit from my father had exceeded all expectations. He had arrived early, taken the complete tour, spent hours with our development team discussing the technical aspects of our authentication algorithms, and asked thoughtful questions about our expansion strategy. I had watched with pride as he engaged genuinely with our designers, showing real interest in their creative processes and business challenges. "You've built something remarkable here," he had told me as we stood on our rooftop terrace overlooking the bustling streets below. "Not just the technology or the business model, but the culture. These people believe in what they're creating." "That was always the goal," I had replied, "to create something that mattered, something that solved real problems in ways that honored both tradition and innovation." Now reviewing the final plans for our foundation's new educational center, I reflected on how dramatically things had shifted since that evening in the Hamptons. Not in my daily routine, which remained largely unchanged, but in the quality of my family relationships and the ripple effects of that single moment of truth. My father and I spoke several times each week now, discussing everything from business strategy to philosophy, and occasionally the finer points of vintage jewelry authentication, a shared interest we had discovered. My mother had finally accepted that I wouldn't be upgrading to a penthouse anytime soon, though she still occasionally slipped designer accessories into my wardrobe just for special occasions. Most surprising was the genuine transformation in my relationship with my siblings. True to her word, Ornella had reached out to learn more about translating her natural talents into meaningful work. We had met for coffee multiple times, and I was impressed by her serious consideration of starting an ethical event planning business focused on sustainable luxury. "I keep thinking about what you said," she had told me during our most recent conversation, "about using my organizational skills for something that creates value rather than just spending money. I've been researching carbon-neutral event planning, working with local artisans instead of imported decorations. Even more dramatically, she had quietly postponed her elaborate Monaco wedding in favor of a smaller ceremony that would allow them to donate the majority of their budget to environmental causes. Dorian was actually relieved. She had confided in me. He never wanted the massive spectacle either, but felt pressured by family expectations. Cassian's evolution had been equally remarkable. He had not only begun volunteering with the financial literacy program for underserved communities, but had also started developing a proposal for more ethical investment strategies at his firm. I realize I've never actually built anything meaningful, he had admitted. Everything I've achieved has been handed to me or accomplished through connections rather than merit. The broader family dynamic had shifted as well. At a cousin's birthday celebration the previous weekend, I had noticed substantially less emphasis on material acquisitions and more genuine conversations about purpose, impact, and personal fulfillment. Whether these changes would prove lasting remained to be seen, but the initial transformation was encouraging. My assistant knocked gently on the door, interrupting my reflections. "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here. The young designer you mentioned wanting to meet." "Send her in," I said, standing to greet our visitor. Nora entered nervously, a 22-year-old recent graduate with innovative ideas about sustainable fashion and zero-waste design principles. She had applied for our emerging designer mentorship program with a compelling proposal for creating luxury garments entirely from textile waste. "Miss Thais," she said, extending her hand formally, "thank you so much for meeting with me personally." "Just Thais, please," I corrected gently, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I was impressed by your portfolio, Nora. Your approach to waste reduction while maintaining aesthetic sophistication is exactly the kind of innovation our industry needs." She brightened visibly. "I've been developing these techniques since college, but it's been difficult to find manufacturers willing to experiment with unconventional materials." As she outlined her vision for transforming discarded fabric into couture-quality pieces, I was struck by her passion and clarity of purpose. She reminded me of myself at that age, though she faced economic barriers I never encountered. This was precisely the kind of designer Thessaly would have wanted to support. Someone with genuine talent and vision who simply needed opportunity and guidance. "How would you feel about being our first full mentorship participant?" I asked her when she finished her presentation. "You would work directly with our design team 3 days a week, develop your collection with professional support and manufacturing connections, plus receive a stipend to cover your living expenses during the program." Her eyes widened with disbelief. "Are you serious? That would completely change my trajectory. I could actually focus on designing instead of working 3 part-time jobs just to afford materials." "Completely serious," I assured her. "Your vision has real potential to influence how the entire industry approaches sustainability. With proper support and resources, you could help revolutionize fashion's relationship with waste." As we discussed the program details, I felt the familiar weight of Thessaly's necklace against my chest, a tangible reminder of the responsibility that came with success. In helping Nora develop her sustainable designs, I was honoring my mentor's legacy in the most meaningful way possible, by creating opportunities for the next generation of innovators. After Nora left, practically floating with excitement about her new opportunities, I called my father to update him on the mentorship program expansion. "I'd like to contribute to this initiative," he said after I described our plans. "Not just financially, though we can discuss that separately, but with time and expertise. I have manufacturing connections that might be valuable to these young designers." "That would be incredible," I told him, genuinely moved by his offer. "The designers would benefit enormously from your business experience and industry knowledge."
And I suspect I would learn equally much from their fresh perspectives and innovative approaches, he replied. Tonight's revelation showed me that I've been measuring success too narrowly. I want to be part of building something that creates lasting value beyond profit margins. As we finalized plans for his involvement, I thought about how authenticity had unexpected power to inspire change in others. My decision to live according to Thessaly's philosophy had influenced not just my own path, but increasingly the choices made by those around me. Later that evening, as I rode the subway home through the familiar tunnels beneath Manhattan, I studied the diverse faces of fellow passengers. Construction workers heading home after long shifts, nurses in scrubs traveling between hospitals, students with backpacks full of dreams, business professionals in suits similar to my own, each carrying their own definition of what mattered most. Thessaly had moved through the world this way, seeing individuals rather than categories, stories rather than status symbols. She understood that genuine worth was invisible to casual observation, but revealed itself through actions, choices, and the impact we had on others' lives. In my apartment that night, I carefully removed the necklace and held it in my palm, feeling its weight and significance. It had become far more than jewelry to me. It was a compass guiding my decisions, a reminder that authentic success lay not in what others thought of my achievements, but in the contributions I made and the values I lived by. The necklace would never hang in a museum or be locked in a vault. It would continue to accompany me through board meetings and design collaborations, through family gatherings and quiet moments of reflection. It would mark the hours of my life as it had marked Thessaly's, witness to the creation of something meaningful and enduring. As I prepared for sleep, my phone chimed with the message from Ornella. She had just finished her first meeting with a sustainable event planning consultant and was excited about the possibilities. "I think I finally understand what Thessaly meant about authentic success," she wrote. "Thank you for showing me there are different ways to measure a life well lived." I smiled as I replied, thinking about how genuine connections and purposeful work were the truest indicators of success. The necklace had caught my family's attention that transformative evening, but what truly mattered was the philosophy it represented, the understanding that our worth is determined not by our wealth, but by the contributions we make to something larger than ourselves.